Under pressure, they choked her in training, but the Navy SEAL changed the course of battle.
The Pacific Ocean stretched endlessly beyond the Coronado Naval Base as Emma Rhodes checked her dive equipment for the third time. Salt air filled her lungs while California sunshine warmed her shoulders, but she felt only ice in her veins. Today marked week 8 of the most grueling experience of her life, and she knew the instructors were saving their worst for her. 29 candidates had started this experimental Navy SEAL training cycle. Now only 14 remained. Emma was the sole woman still standing, and she could feel the weight of history pressing down on her with every breath. Her father, Sergeant Major Thomas Rhodes, had survived 3 tours in Iraq before an IED took his legs. He told her once that the hardest battles are fought not against enemies, but against people who should be on your side. She understood that now more than ever, Senior Instructor Jackson Pierce stood at the edge of the combat training pool, clipboard in hand and judgment in his eyes. At 42, Pierce was a legend in the special operations community. 2 Silver Stars, countless successful missions, and an unwavering belief that women had no place in his world. He made no secret of it during training, though he was careful to keep his words just within regulation boundaries. His actions told a different story. Emma walked toward the pool with measured steps, her boots echoing on the concrete. The other candidates formed a semicircle around the training area, their faces showing a mixture of sympathy and relief that they were not the ones being called forward. She had learned their names, shared meals with them, bled alongside them during endless obstacle courses and punishing ruck marshes. Some genuinely respected her. Others simply tolerated her presence. None would speak up for her when it mattered. That was the nature of survival here. Pierce gestured toward the water without looking at her directly. His jaw was set in that familiar expression of barely concealed contempt that she had grown accustomed to over the past 2 months. Behind him stood 3 assistant instructors, all watching with varying degrees of interest. One of them, Chief Petty Officer Robert Kane, caught her eye briefly before looking away. She thought she saw something there, perhaps concern, but it vanished too quickly to be sure. The drill was straightforward in theory. Underwater confidence training designed to simulate the panic and disorientation of combat scenarios gone wrong. Candidates would be restrained and submerged, required to demonstrate composure while fighting every instinct to break free and breathe. Most lasted 45 seconds before being released. The record was 93 seconds, set by a candidate who went on to serve with SEAL Team 6. Emma had held her breath for 4 minutes and 17 seconds during her competitive swimming days at UCLA. She held the Pac-12 record for the 200-meter butterfly. Water was her element, her sanctuary, the place where she felt most alive. The instructors knew this, which was precisely why Pierce had volunteered to conduct her evaluation personally. She entered the pool without hesitation, the cool water rising to her chest as she waded toward the deep end. Pierce followed, his movements deliberate and controlled. He carried the training restraints, heavy-duty nylon straps designed to bind a candidate's wrists behind their back while leaving enough mobility to prevent actual injury. In the right hands, they were uncomfortable but safe. In the wrong hands, they could be weaponized. Emma turned her back to Pierce and placed her hands together as instructed. The straps tightened around her wrists with practiced efficiency. She tested the bonds subtly and found them secure but not cutting off circulation. That was something, at least. Pierce was many things, but he was not stupid enough to leave visible evidence of malice. "Breathe steady," Pierce said, his voice low enough that only she could hear. "You're going to want to remember how." Before Emma could respond, his hand pressed firmly on her shoulder and pushed her beneath the surface. The water closed over her head, muffling the sounds of the world above. She could see the distorted shapes of the other candidates through the rippling surface, their faces watching her ordeal with detached curiosity. Sunlight filtered down through the water in shimmering columns. Beautiful and indifferent, Emma controlled her breathing reflex and focused her mind. 20 seconds passed. Her lungs remained calm, her body relaxed. This was familiar territory. 30 seconds. 40. She knew Pierce would be watching the clock, following the standard protocol. Any moment now, he would release the pressure and let her surface for air. 50 seconds. 60. The pressure remained constant on her shoulder, holding her down. Emma's eyes opened wider beneath the water as realization crashed over her like a wave. This was not standard training. This was not about building confidence or testing her limits within acceptable parameters. Pierce was sending a message, and that message was written in the burning sensation beginning to build in her chest. 75 seconds. Her lungs began to ache, demanding oxygen her body could not provide. The edges of her vision started to darken slightly, the first warning signs of oxygen deprivation. Above her, Pierce's hand remained steady and unyielding. 90 seconds. Emma's competitive training kicked in, her mind automatically shifting into the mental state she had cultivated during hundreds of pool sessions. She slowed her heart rate through sheer force of will and began recycling the air in her lungs with practiced efficiency. But even champions have limits. 105 seconds. Panic tried to claw its way into her consciousness, whispering that she should fight, struggle, signal her distress. But Emma knew that showing weakness now would end everything she had worked for. Every woman who came after her would face the question, if she could not handle the pressure, how could they? Her father's words echoed in her memory. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is deciding that something else matters more. 120 seconds. Emma's vision tunneled dramatically. Her body screamed for air, every cell demanding that she fight for survival. Through the distortion of water and fading consciousness, she saw Pierce's face above her, watching her suffer with cold calculation. And then, just as darkness began to claim her completely, she felt the pressure release. Emma exploded to the surface. Gasping and choking, her lungs burning as they dragged in precious oxygen. Water streamed down her face as she struggled to orient herself, her bound hands making it difficult to maintain balance. Pierce stood 3 feet away, his expression unreadable as he made notations on his waterproof clipboard. The training area was completely silent. Every candidate stood frozen, staring at the scene before them with expressions ranging from shock to horror. Chief Petty Officer Kane had taken several steps forward, his hand outstretched as though he had been about to intervene. Emma found her footing and stood in the chest-deep water, her breathing gradually returning to normal despite the fire in her lungs. She looked directly at Pierce, water dripping from her hair into her eyes, and waited for him to acknowledge what had just happened. Pierce clicked his pen and made a final mark on his evaluation sheet. 2 minutes, 11 seconds, he announced to the group. New training record. Congratulations, Lieutenant Rhodes. You pass. He turned away as though nothing unusual had occurred, as though he had not just held her underwater for nearly twice the standard duration, as though he had not crossed every line of acceptable training protocol. Emma stood in the water, her wrists still bound, and felt something fundamental shift inside her chest. This was war, after all, and she intended to win it. The medical bay smelled of antiseptic and defeat. Emma sat on the examination table while the base physician, Dr. Patricia Wong, checked her vital signs with practiced efficiency. The older woman had seen hundreds of SEAL candidates pass through these doors, most of them broken in body or spirit or both. She said nothing as she recorded Emma's blood pressure, but her lips formed a thin line of disapproval. Elevated heart rate, minor capillary damage in the eyes, symptoms consistent with hypoxia, Dr. Wong finally said, setting down her stethoscope. "How long were you under?" Emma met her gaze steadily. 2 minutes, 11 seconds, ma'am. Standard protocol calls for 45 to 60 seconds maximum. Dr. Wong's voice remained neutral, but her meaning was clear. "I could file a report. With respect, ma'am, I passed the evaluation. That's what matters." Dr. Wong studied her for a long moment, and Emma saw recognition in those tired eyes. This woman understood the impossible calculation that female service members faced every day. Report the abuse and be labeled a troublemaker, someone who could not handle the pressure. Stay silent and endure, hoping to outlast the prejudice through sheer determination. There were no good options, only choices between different kinds of pain. "Your lungs are clear, but I want you back here if you experience any dizziness or chest pain," Dr. Wong said, signing off on the medical clearance form. "And Lieutenant, for what it's worth, my daughter is 11 years old. She wants to be a fighter pilot. Women like you are the reason she believes that's possible." Emma left the medical bay as the sun dipped toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. She should have felt triumphant. She had survived Pierce's test and set a training record that would be difficult for anyone to match. Instead, she felt hollow, as though something essential had been carved out of her during those 2 minutes beneath the water dot. Her phone buzzed with a text message. The name on the screen made her chest tighten. Jessica Rhodes, her younger sister by 3 years. Emma opened the message and saw a photo of Jessica in full combat gear, helmet tilted back, grinning at the camera despite the dust and exhaustion visible on her face. The background showed the familiar tan buildings and desert, landscape of somewhere in the Middle East. The text read, "Day 47 in paradise. Heard you're still kicking but in SEAL training. Make them regret ever doubting you." Emma stared at the photo until her vision blurred. Jessica had enlisted in the Army right out of high school, driven by the same stubborn Rhodes family pride that had sent their father into the Marines and their grandfather into Korea. She was currently deployed with a military police unit, conducting convoy security operations in one of the most dangerous regions in the world. Every day, Jessica put her life on the line, trusting that the people above her in the chain of command would make decisions based on competence and mission requirements, not gender. That trust was what Emma was fighting for, not just for herself, but for every woman who would wear the uniform after them. Lieutenant Rhodes. Emma turned to find Chief Petty Officer Robert Kane standing 10 feet away, his hands clasped behind his back in a position of parade rest. At 34, Kane was one of the younger senior instructors, with sharp features and observant eyes that missed nothing. He had served with distinction in Syria and Yemen, earning a Navy Cross for actions that remained classified. Unlike Pierce, Kane had never shown open hostility toward Emma's presence in the program, but neither had he offered support until now. Apparently. "Chief," Emma acknowledged. Keeping her voice neutral, Kane glanced around the empty walkway before speaking. "What happened today in the pool was not standard protocol. You should know that. I passed the evaluation. That's all that matters. Is it?" Kane stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Lieutenant, I've been an instructor here for 4 years. I've watched dozens of candidates go through underwater confidence training. No one, and I mean no one, has ever been held under for more than 90 seconds. What Pierce did today crossed the line." Emma felt her jaw tighten. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because someone needs to, and because I'm tired of watching good candidates get pushed out of the program for the wrong reasons." Kane paused, weighing his next words carefully. 3 years ago, we had another female candidate make it to week 6. Lieutenant Jennifer Briggs, top of her class at Annapolis, expert marksman, could outrun half the men here. She dropped out after a training accident during dive operations. Broken collarbone, they said. The official report blamed equipment failure. And unofficially, 2 candidates came forward months later and said they saw Pierce sabotage her regulator. Kane's expression hardened. Nothing was ever proven. Both candidates mysteriously failed their next evaluations and were removed from the program. Pierce got promoted. The implications settled over Emma like a lid blanket. This was not just about one instructor's personal prejudice. This was systematic, institutional, protected by a culture that valued loyalty to the brotherhood above all else, even basic human decency. Why tell me this now? Emma asked. Why not 3 weeks ago? Or 6 weeks ago? Because 3 weeks ago, I wasn't sure you'd make it this far. Most candidates, male or female, would have quit after what you've endured. Kane met her eyes directly. But you didn't. And after today, after watching you stay under for 2 minutes while Pierce tried to break you, I realized something. You're not going to quit, which means Pierce is going to escalate. Emma felt cold despite the warm evening air. What do you suggest I do about it? Document everything. Keep a detailed log of every interaction, every evaluation, every training exercise. Times, witnesses, specifics. Kane pulled a small notebook from his pocket and handed it to her. And start building all eyes. You can't fight this alone. Emma took the notebook, feeling its weight in her hand. You're risking your career by helping me. Maybe, but I joined the Navy to protect people who couldn't protect themselves. That includes candidates in my own training program. Kane stepped back, his voice returning to normal volume. Next week, we start the advanced combat simulation phase. Teams of 4, operating in hostile territory scenarios. Pierce gets to select the team compositions. You need to be ready for anything. He walked away before Emma could respond, leaving her standing alone on the walkway as darkness settled over the base. She opened the notebook and saw that Kane had already made the first entry. Detailed notes about today's pool incident, including timestamps and the names of witnesses. It was a lifeline and possibly a trap. Trust was a luxury she could not afford. Emma returned to her barracks, a sparse room she shared with her dear and her doubts. She sat on her bunk and pulled out her father's letter, the one he had written to her the day she reported for SEAL training. The paper was creased from being folded and unfolded countless times, the ink slightly smudged from her sweaty hands during particularly difficult moments. Emma, the letter read in her father's careful handwriting. By the time you read this, you'll be facing challenges that would break most people. Some of those challenges will come from the enemy. Some will come from the environment. But the hardest ones will come from people who are supposed to be on your side. When that happens, and it will happen, remember this. You are not fighting for them. You are fighting for the person you're going to save someday, the mission you're going to complete, the example you're going to set. That's worth more than their approval could ever be. Love, Dad. Emma folded the letter carefully and placed it back in her footlocker. Then she opened Kane's notebook and began writing. Every detail of the past 8 weeks, every suspicious equipment failure, every evaluation that seemed designed to make her fail. The pattern was unmistakable once she laid it all out in black and white. Pierce was not working alone. He had support from at least 2 other instructors, and tacit approval from the base command. Structure. She was writing her entry about a suspicious rope failure during the obstacle course in week 3 when her phone buzzed again. Another message from Jessica. Forgot to mention, we're getting attached to a SEAL team next month for a joint operation. Crazy, right? Maybe I'll get to work with some of your future teammates. No pressure, but don't let me down, sis. Emma stared at the message, her throat tight. Jessica had no idea what she was walking into. SEAL teams operated in the most dangerous environments imaginable, and if the culture at the training command was this toxic, what would it be like in the actual teams? Would Jessica's military police unit be properly supported by operators who believed women had no place in combat? Would prejudice get her killed? The thought crystallized Emma's resolve into something harder than diamond. This was not just about her anymore. It never had been. A knock on her door interrupted her thoughts. Emma tensed, but relaxed slightly when she saw candidate officer Ryan Mitchell standing in the hallway. Mitchell was one of the few trainees who had consistently treated her as an equal. Former Marine Corps infantry officer, 2 deployments to Afghanistan, and a reputation for fairness that had earned him respect among the other candidates. "Hey, Rhodes, got a minute?" Mitchell asked, his usual easy smile noticeably absent. "What's up? What's up?" Mitchell glanced down the hallway before entering her room. "Listen, I need to tell you something. Team assignments for next week's combat simulation got posted. You're with Pierce's group." Emma felt her stomach drop. "Pierce is leading one of the simulation teams?" "Yeah, and here's the thing that's got me worried. Your team is you, plus 3 candidates who washed out of the program last cycle and got recycled. Anderson, Brooks, and Petty. All 3 of them have openly complained about women in special operations. All 3 of them are tight with Pierce. The implications were staggering. 4 against 1 in a combat simulation designed to push candidates to their absolute limits, with an instructor who had already demonstrated his willingness to endanger her life. It was not just a training exercise. It was an execution. "There's more," Mitchell continued. "I overheard Pierce talking to Commander Stevens. The simulation is being moved to the North Island facility instead of the usual training grounds. More isolated, fewer observers, minimal medical support nearby." Emma processed this information with growing dread. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because what's happening to you is wrong, and because I have 2 daughters at home who might want to serve someday." Mitchell's jaw tightened. "I can't directly intervene without getting kicked out myself, but I can make sure someone knows what's going on. Kane's already aware. I've also reached out to a friend at Naval Criminal Investigative Service, just in case." "Just in case what?" Mitchell met her eyes directly. "Just in case something happens to you during the simulation. Someone needs to ask the right questions." After Mitchell left, Emma sat alone in her room as the full weight of her situation became clear. She was not just fighting to become a Navy SEAL. She was fighting to survive long enough to earn that right. And next week's combat simulation might determine whether she succeeded or became another cautionary tale. Another female candidate who could not handle the pressure. Emma pulled out her phone and looked at Jessica's photo again. Her sister's grin was infectious, full of confidence and determination. Jessica believed in her. Dr. Wong's daughter believed in her. Countless women serving in uniform across every branch of the military believed in her, whether they knew her name or not. She could not let them down. Not because of Pierce, not because of a toxic culture, not because the system was rigged against her. She would find a way to survive the simulation and prove that women belonged anywhere warriors were needed. Emma opened Kane's notebook and began planning. If Pierce wanted to escalate, she would be ready. The underwater confidence training had been a test. Next week's combat simulation would be war, and Emma Rhodes intended to win. The helicopter blades chopped through the night air as Emma checked her equipment one final time. The combat simulation had been scheduled for dawn, a 20-hour endurance test in the desolate terrain of North Island. But 3 hours ago, everything changed. Commander Stevens burst into the briefing room with news that transformed their training exercise into something far more real. A cargo ship had been hijacked by armed militants 200 miles off the coast of Baja California. 18 crew members held hostage, demands escalating, and the situation deteriorating rapidly. The closest SEAL team was 12 hours away. The training command had 4 qualified combat swimmers and a collection of candidates who had been preparing for exactly this kind of scenario. Even if none of them expected it to be real. Emma sat across from Pierce in the helicopter, their eyes meeting briefly in the red glow of the cabin lights. Whatever personal animosity existed between them had been temporarily shelved. Lives were at stake, and even Pierce understood that professionalism had to come first. Beside her sat Mitchell, who had volunteered immediately when the call went out. Kane occupied the seat next to Pierce, his expression focused and calm. The 4th member of their team was Anderson, one of the recycled candidates who had made his feelings about women in combat abundantly clear during training. "Listen up," Kane shouted over the roar of the helicopter. "Intelligence says we have 8 to 10 hostiles, armed with automatic weapons. They're holding the crew in the cargo hold below deck. Our job is simple: fast rope onto the ship, neutralize the threats, secure the hostages, and get out. Rules of engagement are weapons free. Any questions?" Emma's heart hammered in her chest, but her hands remained steady as she checked her rifle. This was everything she had trained for, compressed into one impossible moment. No second chances, no margin for error, no instructors to pull her out if things went wrong. "Rhodes," Pierce said, his voice cutting through her thoughts. "You take point on the water approach. We need someone to disable the rudder mechanism before we board. That's your specialty, right?" Emma recognized the test hidden within the order. The water approach was the most dangerous part of the operation, requiring her to swim beneath the moving vessel and attach explosive charges to disable its steering. One mistake, and the ship's propeller would kill her instantly. It was also absolutely essential to mission success. If the hijackers could maneuver the ship, they could ram other vessels or run the rescue operation into chaos. "Yes, sir," Emma responded without hesitation. "I'll need 8 minutes. You have 6. After that, we're coming in whether you're done or not." The helicopter descended rapidly, the ocean rising to meet them in the darkness. Emma secured her rebreather and checked the explosive charges one final time. Dr. Wong's words echoed in her mind. "My daughter is 11 years old. She wants to be a fighter pilot." This mission was not just about the hostages on that ship. It was about proving that women could perform under pressure when it mattered most. The helicopter hovered 50 feet above the water, and Emma jumped without waiting for the signal. The cold Pacific swallowed her whole, the shock of impact driving the air from her lungs. She descended 20 feet, activated her underwater propulsion device, and oriented herself toward the cargo ship's coordinates. The vessel appeared as a dark mass against the lighter surface water, its engines creating a turbulent wake that threatened to pull her off course. Emma approached from the stern, feeling the vibration of the massive propeller through the water. This was where her competitive swimming background transformed from a curiosity into a critical asset. She understood water dynamics in a way that most combat swimmers learned intellectually but never truly internalized. The ocean was not her enemy. It was her advantage. She maneuvered beneath the hull with practiced efficiency, attaching the first charge to the rudder assembly. The mechanism was larger than the training models, and for a moment, Emma's fingers fumbled with the magnetic clamp. Her father's voice cut through the panic. Courage is deciding that something else matters more. She forced her breathing to slow, secured the charge properly, and moved to the secondary attachment point. 4 minutes had elapsed. She had 2 charges left to place, and the current was stronger than anticipated. Emma kicked hard, fighting against the water's resistance, and nearly missed the 3rd attachment point entirely. Her air supply was running low, and she could feel the beginning of nitrogen narcosis affecting her judgment. Everything depended on the next 90 seconds. She placed the 3rd charge with shaking hands and began swimming toward the final position. That was when she saw him. One of the hijackers had spotted the helicopter approach and was now hanging over the ship's railing, scanning the water with a flashlight. The beam swept across the surface, searching for any sign of the assault team. Emma froze beneath the hull, knowing that any movement would create ripples that might give away our position. She watched the flashlight beam dance across the water, coming closer with each pass. Her lungs burned, demanding air she could not take. The irony was not lost on her. She had survived Pierce, holding her underwater during training, only to potentially drown during an actual mission. The flashlight beam passed directly over her position, and for a heartbeat, Emma thought she had been spotted. But the hijacker's attention shifted to the helicopter's direction, and he shouted something in rapid Spanish to his companions. Emma seized the moment, surged forward, and slammed the final charge into place with 5 seconds to spare on her 6-minute deadline. She surfaced 200 yards from the ship, exactly where the extraction protocol required, and keyed her radio twice to signal success. Pierce's voice crackled in her earpiece. Charges confirmed. Moving to Phase 2. Nice work, Rhodes. The compliment was so unexpected that Emma almost missed the next instruction. She watched from the water as 4 shadows fast-roped from the helicopter onto the ship's deck. Muzzle flashes lit up the night as the assault team engaged the hijackers. She could hear shouting, the distinctive crack of rifle fire, and then a moment of terrible silence. "Rhodes, get up here now," Kane's voice commanded. "We need you." Emma deployed her climbing equipment and scaled the ship's hull, her wetsuit streaming water. She rolled onto the deck and found Kane crouched behind a cargo container, his face grim. Mitchell lay nearby, clutching his shoulder where blood seeped between his fingers. Anderson was providing cover fire while Pierce worked on breaking through the locked door to the cargo hold where the hostages were being held. "Situation?" Emma asked, dropping beside Kane. 6 hostiles down, but we've got a problem." The leader barricaded himself in the cargo hold with the hostages and rigged explosives to the door. "Pierce can't breach without triggering them. We need someone small enough to go through the ventilation shaft and disable the charges from inside." Emma looked at the ventilation grate Kane was indicating. It was barely 18 inches square, leading into a shaft that dropped straight down into the cargo hold. Anyone going through would be completely vulnerable, unable to use weapons effectively in the confined space, and trapped if the explosives detonated. "I'll go," Emma said before she could think better of it. Pierce appeared beside them, his face streaked with sweat and gunpowder residue. "Rhodes, this is not a training exercise. If those charges blow while you're in that shaft, there won't be enough left of you to send home. With respect, sir, those hostages don't have time for us to debate alternatives. I'm the smallest person on this team, and I've trained for confined space operations. Let me do my job." Something passed between Pierce and Emma in that moment, an understanding that transcended their personal conflict. He had spent months trying to prove she did not belong here, and now her presence might be the only thing standing between 18 innocent people and death. "You have 3 minutes," Pierce said finally. "After that, we breach anyway and hope for the best." Emma stripped off her tactical vest to reduce her profile and squeezed into the ventilation shaft. The metal walls pressed against her shoulders as she descended, using her elbows and knees to control her movement. Below, she could hear voices. The hijacker leader shouting demands in accented English. A woman crying. A child whimpering in fear. The shaft opened into the cargo hold through a grate positioned near the ceiling. Emma could see the scene below. 18 hostages huddled against the far wall, the hijacker pacing back and forth with a detonator in his hand, and the explosive charges wired to both the door and the walls. Professional work, suggesting military training. This was not some desperate criminal. This was a true believer willing to die for his cause. Emma studied the explosive setup, her mind racing through the bomb disposal training she had received. The charges were wired in series, which meant disabling the primary circuit would neutralize them all. But the primary circuit ran through the detonator in the hijacker's hand. She would have to get it away from him without triggering an explosion. Her father had lost his legs to an IED in Fallujah. Emma had been 13 when she visited him in the hospital. Watching this man who had seemed invincible reduced to broken pieces held together by titanium and determination. He told her that fear was just information, data to be processed and used. The trick was not to eliminate fear, but to act despite it. Emma kicked out the ventilation grate and dropped 12 feet to the cargo hold floor, landing in a combat roll that brought her up with her sidearm aimed at the hijacker's center mass. The man spun toward her, surprise registering on his face for a fraction of a second, before his thumb moved toward the detonator button. Time seemed to slow. Emma could see every detail with crystal clarity. The hijacker's finger descending, the hostages beginning to scream, the red light on the detonator starting to blink. And in that impossible moment, she made a choice that defied every tactical principle she had ever learned. She lowered her weapon. "Wait," Emma said in Spanish, her voice cutting through the chaos. "You want the world to hear your message, right? That's why you took this ship. But if you press that button, you become just another terrorist who killed innocent people. Is that the legacy you want?" The hijacker's thumb hesitated millimeters from the button. His eyes were wild, desperate, but also calculating. "You don't understand what we're fighting for. Then tell me. Tell the world. But these people, these crew members, they're not your enemy. They're just trying to make a living, feed their families. Just like you're trying to fight for yours." Behind her, Emma could hear Pierce and the team stacking up outside the door, ready to breach. She raised her hand slightly, signaling them to hold position. Everything depended on the next 30 seconds. "My village was destroyed by your country's weapons," the hijacker said, his voice breaking. "My family, my children, everyone I loved. And the world did nothing. No one cared. No one even knew our names." "I'm sorry," Emma said, and meant it. "I'm sorry for what happened to your family. But I have a sister deployed right now. She's fighting because she believes she's protecting people. If something happens to her, I don't know what I'll do. But I know I won't want revenge against people who had nothing to do with it. These hostages, they're someone's sister, someone's daughter, just like mine." The hijacker's hand trembled. The detonator's red light continued blinking, waiting for the final command that would end all of their lives. Emma could see the war happening behind his eyes, rage and grief battling against the last remnants of his humanity. "What's your name?" Emma asked softly. "Gabriel," he whispered. "Gabriel, my name is Emma, and I'm asking you, one human being to another, please don't make more orphans today. Don't create more people who carry the same pain you're carrying. Let it end here." The cargo hold was utterly silent. 18 hostages held their breath. Outside the door, Pierce and his team waited for the explosion that would signal failure. And in the middle of it all, Emma stood with her weapon lowered, betting everything on the possibility that compassion could succeed where force would certainly fail. Gabriel's thumb moved away from the detonator button. He set the device down carefully on a cargo crate and raised his hands in surrender. "I'm tired," he said simply. "I'm so tired of death." Emma moved forward slowly and secured the detonator, her hands finally shaking as the adrenaline caught up with her. She keyed her radio. Hostages secure. Threat neutralized. No casualties. The door burst open and the team flooded in, quickly restraining Gabriel and checking the hostages for injuries. Pierce appeared beside Emma, his expression unreadable as he took in the scene. She expected criticism for deviating from protocol, for taking an insane risk that could have gotten everyone killed. Instead, he extended his hand. "That was either the bravest or the stupidest thing I've ever seen," Pierce said. "I'm still trying to decide which." Emma shook his hand, feeling the strength in his grip. "Maybe it was both, sir. Maybe it was." Pierce's voice softened slightly. "I owe you an apology, Lieutenant. I've spent months trying to prove you don't belong here. Tonight, you proved that this place doesn't deserve you. But I hope you'll stay anyway, because we need more people who understand that sometimes the hardest choice is not to pull the trigger." The hostages were evacuated safely. Gabriel was taken into custody without incident, and the team returned to Coronado as the sun rose over the Pacific. Emma sat in the helicopter, exhausted beyond measure, watching the California coastline materialize out of the morning mist. Mitchell's shoulder wound would heal. Henderson had barely spoken to her during the extraction, but she had seen something shift in his eyes. Respect, perhaps, or at least the beginning of understanding. Kane sat down beside her as they approached the base. "You know the brass is going to have a field day with this. First female SEAL candidate saves hostages on an actual mission during training. It'll be all over the news." "I don't care about the news," Emma said honestly. "I care about getting back to training and finishing what I started. About that." Kane pulled out an official-looking envelope. "Commander Stevens wanted me to give you this. It's your graduation orders. After what happened last night, the review board met in emergency session. You've been granted an exception to complete your remaining training requirements over the next month, but you're officially being assigned to SEAL Team 7. Congratulations, Lieutenant." Emma took the envelope with numb fingers, unable to quite process what she was hearing. She had done it. Despite everything, despite Pierce's sabotage and the institutional resistance and the weight of history pressing down on her shoulders, she had earned her place. Her phone buzzed with a message from Jessica. "Just heard about the rescue mission. Was that you? Call me as soon as you can. I'm so proud of you I could burst." Emma smiled, tears threatening at the corners of her eyes. She thought about Dr. Wong's 11-year-old daughter who wanted to be a fighter pilot. She thought about all the women serving in uniform who would hear this story and know that one more barrier had fallen. She thought about her father and what he would say when she called to tell him the news. The helicopter touched down on the landing pad, and Emma stepped out into the morning sunshine. A small crowd had gathered, word having spread quickly about the successful rescue operation. She saw Commander Stevens waiting, along with several senior officers she did not recognize. But the person who caught her attention was a young woman in Navy working uniform, no more than 20 years old, who stood at the back of the crowd, with tears streaming down her face and hope shining in her eyes. Emma walked over to her, ignoring the waiting brass. "Are you okay?" "I report for SEAL training in 3 weeks," the young woman said, her voice shaking with emotion. "Everyone told me I was crazy, that women can't hack it in special operations. But you just proved them all wrong. Thank you for that. Thank you for not giving up." Emma felt the full weight of what she had accomplished settle over her shoulders. This was not about her anymore. It never had been. Every woman who came after her would walk a path slightly less difficult because of what had happened in that cargo hold. Every little girl who dreamed of serving her country would have one more example to point to when someone told her she could not. "What's your name?" Emma asked. "Candidate Officer Jennifer Briggs, ma'am. I'm named after my aunt." She tried to complete. SEAL training 3 years ago, but had an accident and had to drop out. Emma felt her breath catch. The same Jennifer Briggs that Kane had mentioned, the one who Pierce had allegedly sabotaged. The cycle continuing, history preparing to repeat itself. Listen to me very carefully, Emma said, gripping the young woman's shoulder. The next 3 months are going to be the hardest of your life. People will try to break you. Some of them will have good reasons, trying to forge you into the warrior you need to be. Others will have bad reasons, trying to prove you don't belong. Your job is to outlast both. Can you do that? Jennifer straightened her spine, and Emma saw familiar determination in her eyes. Yes, ma'am, I can do that. Good, because 3 weeks from now, when you arrive at Coronado, I'm going to be there. And I promise you that no one is going to treat you the way they treated me. We're going to change this culture, one candidate at a time. But I need you to be strong enough to survive long enough to help me do it. Deal? Deal. Jennifer smiled through her tears. I won't let you down. Emma returned to where Pierce and Kane were waiting. The senior instructor's expression had transformed from the cold hostility she had endured for months into something approaching respect. It was not friendship, and it might never be, but it was a foundation they could build on. Ready to get back to work, Lieutenant? Pierce asked. Always, sir. As Emma walked toward the debriefing room, she pulled out her phone and sent a message to Jessica. Mission complete. Coming home soon. And sis, when you get back stateside, I have so much to tell you. The world is changing, one impossible mission at a time. Love you. The response came immediately. Love you too. You're my hero, you know that? Emma Rhodes smiled and put her phone away. She was not a hero. She was just a woman who refused to quit, who chose to see her opponents as human beings rather than enemies, who understood that sometimes the greatest battles are won, not with weapons, but with words and courage and an unwavering belief that everyone deserves a chance to prove their worth. The sun climbed higher over Coronado Naval Base, casting light on a future that looked different than it had just 24 hours ago. Emma had not changed the world overnight, but she had changed one small corner of it, and that was enough. That was everything, because in the end, that is how progress happens. Not through grand gestures or sweeping declarations, but through individual acts of courage performed by ordinary people who refuse to accept that things must always remain the way they have been. One woman at a time, one mission at a time, one impossible choice at a time, the world becomes a little bit better, and Emma Rhodes was just getting started. The end.